There are meetings that feel arranged by circumstance, and then there are meetings that feel arranged by history, as if the air had been waiting for two lives to collide long before they learned each other's names. He had been raised in gold rooms, and gold rooms had never felt precious. He had shaken hands with prime ministers and felt nothing but the temperature of duty. He had walked through crowds that worshipped him and felt no warmth from devotion. But that night, in a drawing room perfumed with expensive boredom, where laughter carried the hollowness of polished privilege, his eyes paused where they had never paused before. She stood not at the center of the room, but as if she owned the edges of it. The dangerous kind of confidence that comes not from birth, but from survival. Silk dress dark as ink, posture sharp as a cut diamond, a calmness that refused to beg the room for acceptance. Women raised to curtsy were admired. Women unafraid to be unwelcome were noticed, and he noticed her. Her eyes did not widen when she saw him. She did not look impressed. She looked curious, and curiosity is far more seductive than awe. "Your Royal Highness," she said, not breathless, not trembling, simply acknowledging the title like a formality she respected but did not fear. He had been bowed to his entire life. He had never before felt seen. Her smile was small, the kind learned by women who survive rooms that would prefer to swallow them whole. When she laughed, it came not like music for the crowd, but like truth escaping a cage. He felt his control shift, not lost, simply unused. Power recognizes challenge. Loneliness recognizes company. He did not believe in fate, but he believed in attention. And she held his effortlessly. It began quietly. A conversation before supper. A question too honest for polite society. A comment too sharp for a woman meant to be ornamental. "You must be used to being admired." "I am used to being observed." "Admiration is rarer," he laughed. Not the public prince's laugh, the private man's. She did not soften under his gaze. She challenged it, and he found himself grateful for defiance in a world that had only trained him to tolerate obedience. That night, he left with his duty intact and his certainty shaken. A throne demands distance. A heart demands witness. Only one of them had ever been offered to him freely. They met again. Not by accident, not by design either. Some stories choose their authors. There were dinners, the kind where silverware clicks too loudly, where men discuss empires as if they were card games, where women wear smiles like armor. He watched her navigate the social battlefield with precision and grace, never asking for approval, never shrinking to fit a room that had already judged her. "Does it bother you?" he asked once. "That they watch you?" "It bothers me more when they pretend not to," she replied. Truth spoken softly has a gravity louder than any proclamation. He felt it pulling at him. Soon the palace began to notice. A prince can shake hands with nations. He cannot linger near a woman without the world recalibrating its watchfulness. Folders were opened, backgrounds examined, whispers sharpened. American, divorced once, married again, unaffiliated with aristocracy, unforgiven by propriety. They wrote reports not in ink, but in warning. She was not a scandal yet. She was a possibility. Possibility is more dangerous than proof. He was warned gently at first. A raised eyebrow here, a clearing throat there, the subtle choreography of disapproval practiced by those who believe tradition is a religion and they are its priests. She is not suitable. They never needed to say why. In their world, suitability was bloodline, obedience, silence dressed as grace. He listened. He nodded. He ignored them. Inside him, something stirred that had been dormant beneath the weight of privilege. Choice. He had been given every luxury except freedom of affection. He was the future king of millions, and yet had never chosen who could touch his hand without permission. She did not ask for his heart. She simply offered a place where it no longer had to perform, and so a prince began to become a man. The city felt it next. London whispers faster than rivers move. Elegant women paused mid-sentence when her name floated into salons. Men hiding fear behind cigars muttered about dangerous charm. The papers hovered like vultures waiting for flesh to weaken. The church cleared its throat and prepared its purity. The empire adjusted its collar, afraid a single woman's presence might wrinkle it. Yet neither of them spoke of love. They spoke of understanding. Love is loud in the mouths of the naive. In the hearts of those who earn it, it moves like tide, silent, inevitable, irresistible. But love has one enemy more powerful than hate, expectation, and expectation sits not in crowds, but on thrones. When he walked beside her in quiet gardens, when she spoke to him as though he were not an institution but a person, he felt smaller. And in that smallness, finally human. "You do not know what it costs," she warned him once, "to choose me." "I know exactly what it costs," he replied. "I have been paying my whole life for choices I never made. Duty teaches sacrifice. Love teaches surrender. Between them lies exile." But he had not yet learned that lesson. Not fully. The heart learns slowly what the world punishes quickly. Rumor is a quiet hunter. It doesn't rush. It circles first, testing the air, tasting weakness, choosing the softest place to sink its teeth. At first they were only whispers. A prince too often distracted, a woman too calm beneath scrutiny, a silence between them that felt rehearsed not out of guilt, but protection. Protection always looks like guilt to those who benefit from accusation. Soon letters began arriving at desks older than memory. Ink-scratching concerns that pretended to be patriotism. He is attached. He is vulnerable. He is straying from duty. In palaces, concern is rarely gentle. It is sharpened by heritage and polished by entitlement. They called him to meetings disguised as advice. Mahogany rooms, portraits of ancestors staring down like judges, men with clipped tones and clipped hearts. She is married. She is American. She has history. You have obligations. He did not deny her. And silence is confession to those who fear the truth. In the privacy of smaller rooms where royalty becomes simply human, he spoke with frustration sharp enough to bleed. "Do they expect me to marry a statute?" he asked her. "They expect you to marry a version of yourself that never existed," she replied. She understood the battle long before he did. She had lived her life in rooms where approval was currency and origin was debt. "I know what they think of me," she said, voice steady, "that I am ambition in silk, that I am danger in perfume, that I am a woman who wants what she has not been told she can have." He reached for her hand. "You are the only thing in my life I chose freely." "And that," she answered softly, "is what frightens them most. People tolerate love as long as it is convenient. What they fear is love that compels rebellion." He began canceling engagements, quietly at first. He avoided receptions, declined invitations, shortened parades. The public called it fatigue. The palace called it neglect. He called it breathing. With her, rooms felt wider. Expectations faded like fog under morning sun. He found humor again. Not the rehearsed charm of royalty, but the sharp laughter of a man who had finally found someone unafraid to tell him when he was wrong. She never bowed to him. She bowed only to truth. "Power is not a crown," she once told him. "It is the courage to disappoint those who believe they own you." He memorized that sentence the way soldiers memorize last words. But power does not lose easily, and tradition does not forgive insurgency. Soon the whispers turned to strategies. The courtiers moved like chess pieces, measured, silent, ruthless. Ministers began expressing concern. Advisors spoke in polite daggers. Newspaper editors were invited for tea. The storm had been authorized, and through it all, he clung to the one small place where his life felt honest. Her presence, her voice, the steady clarity of a woman who never asked to be saved, only understood. Yet at night, when the palace halls exhaled their ancient breath, doubt paced beside him. Love can be brave, but exile is lonely. Was he prepared to leave everything he had been built to become? Was love enough to build a life on when the world he knew rested on obedience and ceremony? He did not yet know the answer, but he knew he would rather be a man with regrets than a king without a heartbeat. One winter evening, snow brushed the palace windows like whispered warnings. He summoned his most senior advisors, not as a boy in training, but as a sovereign in waiting. When the doors closed, he spoke simply, "I do not intend to abandon the woman I care for." Gasps are rarely heard in royal chambers. That night they floated like broken glass. "You endanger the crown," one murmured. "No," he replied. "I endanger tradition. The crown is not fragile. Pride is." Another leaned forward, voice controlled like a blade. "If you persist, you will lose your position." "If my position demands I become a stranger to myself," he said, "then I have already lost it." Silence followed, heavy, ancestral, offended. He had committed the unforgivable sin of power. He had chosen to belong to himself. Outside, crowds still cheered him. He smiled, he waved. The world believed he was theirs. Inside, the palace corridors grew colder. Stares lasted too long. Footsteps echoed like warnings. Servants lowered voices not out of respect, but fear of witnessing history cracking. The monarchy had fought wars. It had outlived revolutions. It had weathered scandal. It had never, however, prepared for a sovereign willing to give up a throne for the right to love. People think kings fear losing power. What they truly fear is choosing vulnerability. One evening, he found her seated quietly, hands folded, eyes distant, posture firm like someone holding back a storm inside. "They are sharpening their knives," she said without looking at him. "They cannot cut what we keep to ourselves," he replied. She turned to him. No softness in her gaze and only truth. "Your people adore you. They do not know me. They will not forgive you. Then let them hate me," he said. "You do not understand hate yet," she whispered. "Hatred from strangers is noise. Hatred from a nation is exile." He knelt before her, a gesture he had never made to anyone in his life. "I would rather be exiled with you than worshipped without you." Her breath trembled not from triumph, but from sorrow. "Then you must learn to live without applause," she said, "because only love will remain after they are done with us." He nodded. He believed her. He did not yet understand the cost. Power hates uncertainty. Tradition despises questions. Empires prefer efficient heartbreaks. The conflict tightened. Papers printed warnings disguised as morality. Church leaders spoke of sanctity with voices soaked in politics. Ministers whispered indignation into microphones behind closed doors. And the world, that vast, self-appointed judge, prepared to witness a king choose between an empire's expectations and a woman's truth. He was no longer deciding whether he loved her. He was deciding what love was worth, and history sharpened its pen, waiting to record whether he would belong to a throne or to himself. Winter came with the sound of doors closing. He could feel it in the way courtiers stood an inch farther away, in the way letters arrived without the warmth of a salutation, in the way his signature, so long the seal of inevitability, suddenly felt like a question. An empire was not a single building. It was a choreography of expectation. And expectation had decided he would not dance out of step. He understood then that what he was about to do would not be forgiven by architecture. The final week unfolded like a play no one wanted to claim authorship for. Meetings multiplied. Language grew ceremonial, which is to say evasive. He was told the cabinet could not support him. He was told the church would not bless him. He was told the dominions looked across oceans and shook their heads as if duty could be exported. He was told the people would be confused, the markets uncertain, the newspapers unkind. He was told that kings are not men in love, they are metaphors. And metaphors do not take lovers. They take history. He did not sleep much. Neither did she. In the quiet hours, when the palace exhaled old dust and older certainty, he walked corridors lit like sermons and rehearsed the shape of a life after ceremony. He pictured a smaller house with fewer rooms and more truth. He pictured breakfast without staff, a walk without a schedule, and a dress without a throne in it. He pictured her sitting across from him, a cup cradled in both hands. The world shrunk to the size of two people who had refused to be arranged. Once, near dawn, he found her standing by a window as if listening to the city breathe. "They will say you were weak," she said softly. "They will say you ran." He shook his head. "They will say what they must to keep the story simple." "I am tired of simple stories," she reached for him. Neither of them cried. There are moments when the body knows tears would be an indulgence. This was one of them. The day of the speech, snow threatened and then changed its mind, leaving a sky the color of polished pewter. He dressed without hurry. Each garment felt like a relic of a faith he had outgrown. In another room, a microphone waited. A curious confession box made of metal and wires, ready to fling his private certainty into 1,000 public homes. He placed his notes on the table and did not look at them. He had been told to read. He intended to speak. He began without flourish. There is a rare kind of dignity available only to those who have decided to be misunderstood forever. He accepted, with clean sentences, that he could not carry both a crown and a love the world refused to accept. He said that a sovereign must have the confidence of his people and his government, and that his heart could not make that bargain. He declined to dress the wound with romance. He did not tell them they were wrong. He simply told them who he was. Somewhere, in sitting rooms warmed by coal fires, families paused mid-supper to hear a man step down from an inheritance older than the word modern. Some felt betrayed. Some felt relieved. Many felt confused. He felt for the first time in his life like an adult. When he finished, silence held the room in a way applause never could. He removed the ring that had always been heavy. The throne, surprisingly light without him, did not protest. Thrones never do. They are patient furniture. Afterward, there were formalities, the swift, almost indecent efficiency of institutions that cannot afford emotion. Papers were signed. Titles were rearranged like furniture moved against an incoming flood. Routes were planned. Luggage became not luxury but logistics. He walked the last corridor with the polite attention of a man leaving his own wedding early. There is a myth that love's triumph is loud. Sometimes it is a key turning in a side door while the band still plays. He went to her not as a prince or a king or an argument, but as a man who had traded volume for truth. She did not welcome him with victory. She welcomed him with steadiness. "It is done," he said. "It is begun," she corrected. They left the country with the manners of guests who wish their hosts no harm. The train moved, then the ferry, then another train. Exile seldom arrives by carriage. Along the way, he watched a landscape he had been taught to believe belonged to him slip backward, receding into history the way a dream recedes upon waking. He did not regret it. He mourned it. There is a difference. The first house abroad was borrowed, then another rented, then one found that fit the new shape of their days. No palace, but rooms arranged by choice. Windows opened onto streets that did not curtsy when they passed. They were photographed, of course. Curiosity is a more diligent police than law, but the images captured something neither had known they could wear: unimportance. To be unimportant is not humiliation. It is relief. He learned small domestic rituals with a solemnity life had never demanded of him before. He learned how to take a coat without waiting for someone else's hands. He learned how to pour coffee and not badly. He learned the cost of groceries and that bills due at the end of the month make the days feel more honest. He learned that the dog loved them without asking for signatures in morning rooms. He learned that tenderness is not ceremony, and that love, when it is safe, is mostly ordinary. Ordinary did not mean easy. Exile carries its own weather systems. Some days were bright and ridiculous with freedom. Laughter over toast, a walk without a schedule, the two of them inventing holidays for no better reason than to give memory a place to live. Some days were gray with the knowledge that the world had decided to understand their choice in only one dimension. Invitations came from those who wanted proximity to a story. Judgment came from those who needed the story to mean something it did not. She was always the easier villain. He accepted that he had chosen a life where defending her would be a daily liturgy. They traveled because travel made their names feel lighter. Paris taught them how to be graceful with loss. The Riviera taught them how to pretend sunlight had no history. American cities taught them how noise can be a blanket when you are tired of the quiet of being watched. They dressed well because armor should be beautiful when it has to be worn every day. He missed certain rooms sometimes, the hush of libraries that smelled of paper and power, the particular way equerries appear with just the right object at just the right angle, the clean, stupefying certainty of a calendar that tells you who you are by telling you where to sit. But whenever nostalgia grew too bright, he would remember what those rooms had wanted from him and from her. Obedience disguised as destiny. He preferred difficulty to obedience. She missed nothing she could not replace. What she could not replace was the innocence with which she had first walked into London drawing rooms and assumed the world could be negotiated with. There are prejudices that do not disguise themselves, and there are those that wear heraldry. She bore both. Some nights, the weight of being blamed for a man's decision made her quiet. On those nights, he did not argue. He sat beside her and let silence be the apology history would never write. Time, indifferent and expert, softened the angles of their scandal and replaced them with the textures of a long, particular love. They held dinners where laughter cut the tension like skill. They quarreled properly about small things because the large thing had been decided in a winter room long ago. They learned the geography of each other's patience. They aged, which is the only victory that matters between people who chose each other, the right to keep choosing past youth. When news came from home, births, deaths, wars, jubilees, it arrived like weather to a house with good insulation. They honored what should be honored. They shook their heads where they could do nothing. He wrote letters on heavy paper, careful, sometimes formal, sometimes more tender than anyone would guess. He spoke of gardens and of health and of the book he had read and underlined as if it were a map to a country he could still visit. He did not write of regret. To write regret would have been to repay a debt he did not owe. There were interviews he did not give, and parties they should not have attended but did. There were friends who depended on their charm and enemies who depended on their mistakes. There were rumors so persistent they had to learn not to live as corrections to them. Their task was not to persuade the world that they were justified. Their task was to make a life that did not require an audience. On an autumn afternoon, years after the speech, they sat in a garden that did not know their names. Leaves rehearsed the old soft drama of falling. He read aloud from a book of poems he would have been embarrassed to like as a boy. She sewed a button back where it belonged on his cuff, a radius of domesticity that would have made their former selves laugh. He stopped reading and watched her hands, capable, unshockable, elegant, the way survival can be elegant. "I used to think kings were made by ceremony," he said. "And now?" she asked, not looking up. "Now I think the measure of a man is how he behaves when no one is paid to clap." She tied the thread, bit it clean, and looked at him the way only someone who has watched you dismantle your life can look. Without pity, without worship, with a knowledge that makes love less like a firework and more like a hearth. "You were always a man," she said. "It just took you a while to meet yourself." They smiled at the same time, which is an underrated luxury. He taught her some of the old dances, not because the world asked him to perform them, but because the house did. On evenings when dinner turned into 2 glasses of wine and records turned into a floor, she taught him that attention, private,